Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for part 9 of our series on transferring data from Access to Excel. In this video we're going to explore transferring the data for the purpose of graphing it. I've used two different approaches for doing this, and the first, which is in red that we'll be doing tonight, is what I think is probably the easiest. In this approach we build the spreadsheet manually. You type in the data where you want it to be, where the customers want to see it, create your graph, get it all set up, the graphs pointing to the data range, and get everything tweaked and perfect the way you want it. Save it, and then essentially use it as a template. Use Access to open that spreadsheet, pull your new data from your database, and then write it to the existing data range, overwrite the data in the spreadsheet basically. The graph's already pointing to it, the graph adjusts itself to the new data, and then you have your new spreadsheet. The other method I've used is basically doing everything from VBA. You create a spreadsheet and write the data and create the graph and everything from VBA. We'll explore that in the next video in this series. So let's have a quick look at the template of the spreadsheet that I built for this. We have up top here is two merged cells. We have a static title here, and in the second merged cell we want to put a second title. And in this case what we're graphing is fictional sales data by division, by quarter. So in this example we're going to pull data from our database for the second quarter of 2015, and that's what we want our title to be, second quarter 2015. I've got data down here. We have four fictional, very imaginatively named divisions, and then gross sales and gross margin for each one. So our divisions are on the x-axis, and the sales and gross sales are on the y-axis. You can see here we point to the graph is already pointing to our data range. You can look at each data series, click on data series, you can see there's the gross sales data series, and there is where the gross margin series is pointing. So I'm going to move that back out of the way. Let us head over to our code window. Let's slide up here to the top. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to start off here with a string. It's going to hold a query to pull that we'll use to populate a record set. I've built a new table in our database called quarterly sales, and in there we have a sales quarter, which is a number 1 through 4, a sales year, which is also a number of course, a division, meaning a business division. That's going to be our x-axis, and then gross sales and gross margin. And in this case, I'm pulling second quarter equals 2, and of 2015. And we're going to order it by division. And our next statement here, I'm using the open record set method of the current database to execute our query string and put the results in a DAO record set called RS1. And this is all code we've seen in previous videos on transferring data. But again, I just want to, if you're looking at this one and haven't watched the others, give you a quick rundown of what we got here. Next, we've got, I'm testing the record count property to see if we have any data. In this example, I'm not going to bother opening Excel if we have no data. That's something you might want to do anyway, depending upon what your customers want. They might want to see an empty graph if you've got no data. I have to ask them how to handle that. Next, we have an object, an Excel application object, and this set statement will open Excel. And here I've set the visible property to true, and that is because I'm a nerd and I enjoy watching the graph adjust itself as the data is written to it. I just think it's cool. I can't help it. Our next statement is something that you'll probably not want to do this way if you have a production database, but we are setting our workbook object, Excel book, equal to the workbook's open method. We're going to open our spreadsheet, our template spreadsheet. So the open method takes a string. It holds the entire path of file name to the spreadsheet you want to open. Now, if this were a production database, I would definitely not hard code the file name in my code. I would have this table driven somehow. I'd have a table with file names in it, probably have a form that would allow either myself or the customers to point a particular graph to a different spreadsheet. Again, how you would do that and how it would look would be between you and your customers. The next statement here, I'm going to grab a reference to the first worksheet in the workbook. Okay, so we have a worksheet object we're setting equal to the first worksheet in this workbook we just opened. Okay, and I'm doing that because that's where I put the graph. Okay, when you use this method, your code is tightly coupled to this independent object over here, this spreadsheet template. Okay, which means you've got a lot of coding like this in here, which, you know, if something changes in your spreadsheet, you might have to come in here to your code and change it too. That's one of the downfalls of tightly coupling your code. But in this method, that's what it is. It is what it is. So let's move on to. So I'm setting up a with statement here with Excel sheet. That's our worksheet object, so I can use a truncated version of our syntax. The first thing I want to do is set this second title. Now in this example, I'm only pulling 1 quarter's worth of data, so I can do this. If you're pulling additional data, you might have a different title actually, and you wouldn't have to worry about it. But in this case, what I'm trying to build is a string that says second quarter 2015. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got a variable here, a string variable, that I want to set equal to that ordinal number. In my table, I have quarter as a number, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And I need to change that to first, second, third, or fourth. So we're going to set up a select case. We're going to interrogate sales quarter that's on our first row from our spreadsheet. First row from our record set. And if it's 1, it's equal to first. If it's 2, second, and so forth and so on. I have an else down here. I'm not going to try to fake out my customers and hide from them if we have a problem in our data. I'm going to show them that if I have a value other than 1, 2, 3, or 4, those should be the only valid quarter numbers we would have in there. If I have a number other than those, including a null value, I'm going to show them, make it very obvious to them we have a problem with our data, so they will call me and we can fix it. Okay, if we have something other than a 1 through 4 in a sales quarter column, we likely have a problem with whatever process was loading that table to begin with. So we need to go find out what that problem is, fix it, get the data corrected, and then so they can get actual data from their database. Once we have our quarter variable filled with an ordinal number, then I'm going to create that string and load that second title. So we're using the range property. We're feeding it B3, which is our second row, our second title, excuse me, and the value property. And we're setting it equal to our variable quarter, which in this case is going to hold second, a space in the hard-coded word quarter, another space, followed by the sales year from the first row of our record set. I have the NZ function on this guy. If we have something other than a number, if we have a null value in sales year, again, we are going to give them something obvious to see to indicate they have a problem. So they would end up with, second quarter, question marks, if they have a problem. And again, they can call us and tell us we have an issue. Next, all that's left is to take the data from record set and lay it down in the already existing data range that graph points to. So we have an integer here that we're going to use as a row indicator on the Excel side, what row we want to write our data to. Again, in our example template, I have our data starting in row 23. So I'm going to set that I equal to an initial 23. So the first time through our record set, the first row from our record set gets written to row 23 in the spreadsheet. So we have a do-while loop here. While we are not at end of file on record set 1, we're going to write our division and gross sales and gross margin to columns C, D, and E on whatever row counter we're currently on. First time through 123, we increment it by 1, move next row in our record set, we're on row 24 in the spreadsheet, write those values and so forth until we're done. That is it for the code. So let me close this spreadsheet that I have over here. Head over to our form and click the button. And of course it pops up on my other monitor. There you go. And there we have it. We have our second quarter 2015 and our second title. We have a graph which is pointing to our newly modified data. So you can see 125, for instance, corresponds to that. We hover over it. There you go, 125. And that is it. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something from it. And as usual, I'll have a link to the code down in the description below the video, and I'll see you next time.